Farzy, I got to ask you, buddy, what were you up to today? It's the
Uh,
month of May. That's how we start every podcast. Asking Mike Farwell, what did you do today?
well, I'll tell you what. I started with a pretty easy gig after my talk show. I
I was
went
going to
out
say
and
that's the easy gig, Mike. You
the
talk
talk
for
show.
a living.
That's a good point. So my second easy gig of the day was doing some lunch deliveries. But I got to give credit to this group that pulled this together real quick. Yes, they're based in the region of Waterloo, so yes, my bias is showing through. But it's this couple that had a favorite restaurant, and when the pandemic first started, they went to that restaurant on a Tuesday to support the business owner, and they could tell that he was down a little bit, so they promised they'd go back again the next week to keep supporting this local restaurant. And then they got the idea, well, because nobody can go anywhere, why don't we ask our neighbors if they want food from that restaurant, and we'll just bring it back to the neighborhood. And it's grown into this massive thing that every Tuesday this group of volunteers goes out and delivers, and they help out a local independent restaurant. They've kicked $175,000 back into the restaurant industry in the community over the past 15 months. And it's really cool, just the way it started and what it's grown to. So anyway, I did some deliveries with them,
And
and I
don't
had to do.
sorry, Farzy, don't the restaurants put on a special that day that people can order?
That's right, yeah. So
Yeah,
they
it's
go
like
out
so
and
it's a
they.
discount. It's not like you're spending $40 on a meal, right? It's like, hey, come get this burger and fries for $8.
Right, and you think about that for the restaurant though. If they're moving two,
Yeah,
three, sometimes 400 of these things a day, right? That's a nice day for the restaurant. So
for
yeah,
sure.
it's really cool the way it all started. So they had me out to help out with some deliveries, then it was off to do some gardening, and I had to move a few boxes. It's all about the manual labor during Farwell for Hire, Popey, I'll tell you. And I'm less and less manual as as
Yeah.
I age. I need to call you, young fella.
Buddy, the way my body's been feeling lately, no thank you. I think I don't know if I'd be much help. I gotta ask, how come my Farwell for Hire shirt you can't read? It's backwards, but yours is right on the
Hang on.
video here.
Now that's interesting because on the video for me, yours looks proper and
Oh,
mine looks backwards.
okay. Well, then I won't
Okay,
worry about it.
that's fine.
Um, uh, if people don't know what we're talking about, Farwell hires or rents himself out for the month of May to raise money to find a control or cure for cystic fibrosis. Real quick, Farzy, hit them where they can help.
Oh,
We're
Farwell.
yeah.
Yeah, just like the shirt says, if you're watching on YouTube, read Pope's shirt unless mine looks right to you. Maybe they both look right on the video. I don't know. Anyway, Farwell, the number 4 hire.com. You can donate there. You can buy stuff there. You can play a 50-50 there, which is Ontario wide, friends. So jackpot as we record is over $33,000. Not a bad chunk of change. Better than at a, I don't know, Mississauga Ice Dogs game. So anyway, Farwell, the number 4 hire.com. Sorry, Missy, I had to put it out there.
Hey, the $1,000 Thursdays are more than a Mississauga.
Hey ho, you gotta be that way, huh? It's funny because it's true.
Yeah. Okay, so that's going on. What are you gonna do? What are we? May, June, July, August, September, October. 5 months from now, in
I'll tell you.
October, maybe the 7th.
I will tell you exactly what I'm going to do on October the 7th. But before I tell you that, and I'm going to tell you how wrong you are,
Okay.
I did want to just make a quick mention, and thanks to our friend Brent Bell, who likes to listen from the Eastern Conference side of the Ontario Hockey League, says he loves the podcast. So Beller, can I call you Beller? Because that's what we call everybody named Bell that we know, right? Shout out to Steve from Windsor. Anyway, Beller, thanks for letting us know. Thanks for listening to the podcast and passed along the information. And this is a gut wrencher, Popey. Is Steve Carter played for the Bulls from 92 to 95, Kingston native, went on to become a police officer in Kingston, and died suddenly this past week of a heart attack at the age of just 46, way too soon. So condolences to the Carter family, and the Ontario Hockey League family, of course, mourns that loss of the former Belleville Bull who patrolled the blue line back in the day.
That's crazy. Way too young.
Way too young indeed. So you mentioned October the 7th, and what am I going to be doing? And I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to go to work, my easy talk show. I'm going to do that for a few hours. I'm going to come home. I'm going to probably just sit around and tap my feet with anticipation. And about 4:30 that afternoon of October the 7th, 2021, I'm going to make my way over to the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium, where they're going to let me through the doors as a member of the media, and I will ascend the stairs to the broadcast booth. I will not take the elevator. I will climb the stairs, and I will broadcast a Kitchener Rangers game on October the 7th, because that, my friend, is when the season is going to start.
Unless the Rangers start on the road, then you're not doing any of that.
That's not going to happen. The only time we did that was when they were renovating the damn arena. By the way, happy 70th birthday this week to the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium. It turns 70 on the 24th of May.
The grand old dame on East Ave.
Looks good for her age.
I drive by it as much as I can, to be honest with you. Whenever I'm close, I take the long way just because I want to drive by the East Ave entrance. I think it's just still gorgeous.
It really is.
We talk about the Memorial Auditorium in this podcast and the one we just recorded too, because it's the OHL Stories, and there's a lot of stories about what goes on in this Kitchener Memorial Auditorium. But you seem to be a little too excited that the season, or that the schedule hasn't even been announced. They've just announced when the season's going to start.
Yeah, and June 2nd to 12th of 2022 is going to be the Memorial Cup. It's going to be great. Here's the thing, Chris. Here is the thing. We all right now need one thing. I was going to say more than anything else. We need our vaccines more than anything else. But the second thing we really need is some, I was trying not to curse. We need some hope, Poper. We need some hope. And when the Ontario Hockey League, after just weeks, truly, after canceling its season, going through the draft lottery, and then announcing a start date for the next season, says to me they're planning. They're getting ready for another season, and this is the date they are aiming for. I'm not sure we're going to be able to have every seat filled with fans, even if the fans want to be in there. Let's see what public health has to say about that. But we're going to start. We will start on October the 7th, come heck or high water, and we need that hope, and I'm hopeful.
Sure.
You don't think we're starting? What do you mean?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not putting anything past this government anymore, Mike. I'm done. Who knows? Who knows? Everything's been canceled for 2 years. I'm a pessimist. Who knows? Whatever, like maybe I just I work from home. I live at home. Everyone just stays in their house and we'll never see friends and family ever again. I don't know. I'm trying not to be that guy, but you had a full year to get ready for a season one way or another. Every other league did it. You didn't. 5 months from now, at least they have a plan. At least they have a plan. This is what I said a couple weeks ago. I said, I just want them to have a plan, and they have a plan. April 7th, or October 7th. So we'll give them that.
I am calling shenanigans on what you just said. What other leagues had a season? Tell me about these great seasons that everybody had except the Ontario Hockey League. Pros don't count. What
Dub?
What kind of season?
NCAA, everyone.
The Q to a better degree, but really stop.
It's a season.
The Dub called it off, canceled playoffs.
Perfect. It's still a season.
How is it? What did they get? 20 games? 25?
It is still a season, though.
It's nothing.
I
should say it's nothing. Yes.
They have players who have taken it on their own ability and said, you guys can't figure it out. We'll start a tournament in Erie. Like, that's the look you have right now.
Yeah. And you know what? Good on those players. We'll have to reach out to Andrew Parrott. Hey, Andrew, are you listening? We need to talk. Let's get in touch, okay?
Sure.
But you're right. That's not a great look. But and you mentioned the government. I hold the government entirely responsible in this whole mess that it's been. But by October the 7th, by which time most of us should be fully vaccinated here in Ontario, here in Canada, quite frankly, we're going to be in a much, much better place. I'm honestly, I'm beyond optimistic. I'm confident that the season's going to get going.
Listen, watching some of the Stanley Cup playoffs, like down in Carolina, having a full rink.
I know.
Like, I still don't know if it's smart and if I like it. But on the other hand, at this point, I don't care because I love it.
Yeah.
Because people are together. There's an atmosphere. I think it's great.
I remember watching the first Jays game in Texas, right? Where they and Texas, as far as I know, is still there as a state. So let's go. And obviously people are ready. Like, these are, I believe, sporting events, concerts, restaurants are going to be some of the first places to bounce back because we just want to get out there and do stuff again.
I'm just going to say this and then we can move on. I just hope that if they open up somehow, some way, they make it that you have to be vaccinated to go into the building or the place of business, because there's still far too many people that aren't getting vaccinated, and it's just setting us all back.
They might do that. I don't think a government will impose anything like that because it gets pretty touchy. But if an independent entity like a business or an arena wants to do that, okay.
I'm all for it. October 7th, when they announced that that's when the season was going to start, and they announced, like the key dates, what that did for me more than anything was tell me I have 5 months to lose weight, fit into my suits. That's it.
No.
That's basically what it did. You have
tip.
5 months to not eat out 4 times a week and maybe lay off the Vizzy hard seltzers.
Pro tip from the older guy on this podcast. Just buy new suits. That's what you do. Popey, I've been buying new suits for years, buddy.
What I should have done is before 2 seasons ago, when I did drop about 20, 25 pounds, I should have kept the suits I threw out.
You know what's so funny is I remember that, and everybody was walking into the media room on the first game of the season. They're like, Poper, what happened to you?
Yeah.
You've lost so much weight. You look great. It was like the first day of school after the summer holidays, and everybody's coming back looking at the brand new Pope.
Yeah, now I can't find a belt that fits. It's like, why do you only wear hoodies and shorts? Leave me alone.
If you are going to give the shout out, and well done to the Vizzy Hard Seltzer, let me please give a shout out to our friends at Block 3 Brewing in St. Jacobs, because in a matter of days from the time of this podcast's release, you are going to be able to find Face for Radio IPA. Mine would be the Face for Radio, but you buy that beer and you're supporting the Farwell for Hire campaign in support of cystic fibrosis. So go to Block 3 and get yourself some Face for Radio.
Mad at Graham, but I'll buy a couple cans.
What are you mad at Graham for? How could you possibly be?
We had a gentleman's agreement. I held up my end. He didn't hold up his. So I don't understand.
I don't understand.
That's off air. I still like him. I'm just playing it up that he.
Graham's an honorable guy.
I know. So tell him Pope's PO'd.
Okay, I'll let him know when I go pick up my Face for Radio IPA. Yeah.
Well, I know it is the month of May and you're busy. So do you want to get to our guest?
Yeah, let's do that after the quick reminder. Hey, leave us a rating. Shoot us an email if you want to. Our guest last week, Scott McCrory, was the first by request guest. So farwellandpope@gmail.com. Poper's on Twitter @_Chris Pope. I'm on Twitter @Farwell_OHL. And Popey, you're always so good at these introductions to our guests. So I'm going to shut up.
I just want to say
can't wait for October 7th.
Thanks for Lowell for suggesting Scoop, because it was a great interview and had some great stories.
So much fun.
Speaking of great stories and the Oshawa Generals, this guy was once a member of the Oshawa Generals and the St. Michael's Majors. But when you say the name Mike Futa, you automatically think the Owen Sound Attack. He basically built up that organization when he took over and left it getting ready for an OHL championship when he took off to La La Land and spent 7 seasons with the Los Angeles Kings, orchestrating and building both Stanley Cups that they won. And quite frankly, it's been a few months since they let him go, and I can't believe he doesn't have a job in the National Hockey League or anywhere else for that matter, besides Rogers Sportsnet, where it's on. Mike Futa on OHL Stories.
Obviously, Mike, there's a lot of ground to cover with you when it comes to the Ontario Hockey League, but I thought the place really to begin the dive here is in Owen Sound, where you really made the name for yourself in the league, certainly put a stamp on a franchise, but the Attack at the time were, and they still remain, the smallest market in the Ontario Hockey League. And I wonder about that David versus Goliath feeling. Was it really present in the franchise?
If it wasn't, I wanted to incorporate it because I felt that was something that the biggest thing for me, like obviously I started in Mississauga on an expansion team, and then to go to the Oshawa Generals, which had all this storied tradition, and still think I was kind of into coaching and starting to fall in love with the personnel side of it. And of course, Sherry Basson at the time thought he was running the Oshawa Generals and the Erie Otters because he was in Oshawa more than he was in. So he would come in and tell us how to run our franchise at the same time. And then when Owen Sound reached out, he was like, I know you think you're the next Scotty Bowman, but you got a chance to run your own program up there. And it was so frustrating because really there was the list of teams, like everybody that would report to the OHL, and then there was a separate list of people that would report to Owen Sound. And that was the biggest roadblock that I had to knock down as far as making it. I mean, the ownership group was absolutely fabulous. When I met with them, they were like 6 of the most wonderful people you could ever imagine. And they're kind of handing the keys over to the car. And I wanted it to be David versus Goliath. And that was why I wanted our draft list to look like, if we were going to make mistakes, it was because our list was wrong, not because people didn't want to play in Owen Sound. So that first draft, I mean, we had Bobby Ryan at number 1 on our list. And I basically built the whole hiring process around if I could get Bobby Ryan to report to Owen Sound, people are going to report to Owen Sound. Like, it'd open up the market for American players and stuff like that. So I basically hired my coach based on a Bobby Ryan connection with Mike Stothers and stuff like that. And we did it, and we recruited him. And I think that just opened up the door, but it was still that little market. Like, there'd be players like, we get this, guys would be lined up at face-offs saying, we get this, we get that, like talking to Bobby Ryan on the ice, and he'd come back to my office and go, do you know what they get? And stuff like that. And it was just like, and it truly was, it was such a battle, because we had to climb up to, and you had powerhouses, and they were well run. It wasn't just, they were teams that were, I'm never big on this, teams broke the rules thing. I just think there's some people that had exceptional franchises, and they were exceptional hockey people too. Like when you're going head to head with Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott, and they're with the Kitchener Rangers, and then you're going up and you got the London Knights with the Hunter brothers, and Guelph was always, it was tough. And then you had Bass running the Erie Otters, Sherry Basson and stuff. So it was a battle, and we put ourselves squarely in the battle. My ownership group we didn't cheap out in anything. It was a small, you've seen the Lumley Bayshore. It's not like Kitchener, right? But it is a place that teams don't like to come to play. Our dressing room, they turned it into, was like a small National Hockey League dressing room, the weight facility. They did a wonderful job. So they made my job easy as far as recruiting. But yeah, we were always throwing rocks at the Goliaths, and every now and then they hit, and sometimes Goliath gave us a swung right back, got us one of the chops too. But it was an incredible experience for me. And I mean, that community in itself, I'm still very close with the ownership group, and some of the names, I think one of the happiest I ever was, I mean, I didn't get the job done of winning that championship. They said, well, you've got good teams, but nobody's ever going to win there. And when Dale DeGray took the ball across the line with that team and they won, I was just one of the happiest people in the world that community finally had got to taste the victory of that championship that Owen Sound was never supposed to win.
You mentioned Bobby Ryan. He made it very well known that he was going to play in the States. You get him at number 7. What went into that recruitment? Well,
there's a little bit of it I'm not going to get, because his father was in prison at the time, and it's been spoken about. And Bobby Clark was kind of like his surrogate father at the time. And Pat Morris, when I was going through my coaching list for my head coach, he brought up a name of Mike Stothers, who had just been released from the Philadelphia Flyers as an assistant coach. And even though when a Flyer gets released, they're still very tight knit. And my thinking was, if Mike Stothers, after I interviewed him, I loved him, was that if I can use the connection with Philly, that knowing that Bobby Clark trusted Stutz, they trusted me, that getting Bobby under, like he wasn't the prototypical, he was going to Michigan, he was in the program and stuff, but he was kind of player that wanted to fast track the National Hockey League. And it was a good fit. I remember having to go to Dave Branch and say, because of his personal situation, that, like, everybody talked about this, we had this cottage that we built for Bobby Ryan. It wasn't the case at all. We actually had to get permission for his mom to come up, because his father still couldn't cross the border. So his mom would have to come up and live in the community in order for Bobby to report. So it was all above board. But I remember him coming up in the summer, and it was one of those beautiful days. We took him salmon fishing, and he was the worst golfer. He's a scratch golfer. I can't believe he did. He's the worst golfer I've ever seen in my life. He left patches of grass at Stone Tree torn up. And I'm like, how can a guy with hands like you do this to a golf course? And now he's a scratch golfer. But anyways, we found out we were getting him, and it was like, he almost just blew it off. Oh yeah. He goes, my dad spoke with Clarkie, and yeah, we're going to come up. And I was just like, it was like nothing to him. We took him to like a senior B lacrosse game, and it was sold out. So we got to see what the rink looked like packed. Fortunately, he didn't get to see what it looked like with 6 feet of snow, but he came up and he was just engaged by the whole process. And he lived with a great family, a Steakhouse family, along with Wes Cunningham. His mom lived with him, and he loved every minute of it. I'm sure there were times like he had the local girlfriend at the time and stuff like that. And he was a huge part of the community, but it was a battle. Like once he went second overall, I mean, Bobby's just such a happy-go-lucky guy. And I mean, like Brian Burke was coming up saying, listen, if you don't get your act together, we're going to both be running a McDonald's franchise together and stuff like that. So now Stutz had to become a bit of a hard ass, and Bobby kind of came in one day, like he had extra bike rides. And Stutz was like, Bobby came in, when you brought me here, you didn't tell me I was going to the Tour de France? He goes, I thought I was going to. So we had some fun with him, but Bobby finally found out what hard work was. And then when he got to the National Hockey League and his body was in a lot better condition, some of those natural, incredible hands that he had started to take off. And we've remained very close. And it's just been so nice to see. Obviously, he went through some adversity there, but he's a special young man, and he's always got we had something for Helen Lewis was going through some health problems up in Owen Sound, and I called all the guys that were making the big money in the National Hockey League that had played there, and within a second we had raised $10,000-$15,000 for Helen. So that community, the guys that came through there, like the big namers like Giordano and Simmer and Bobby Ryan, they've really not forgotten about it, and they look after the people there. It was very fond memories.
How much did Bobby Ryan's recruitment pave the way for those other names that followed?
It was huge, Mike, because now, first of all, guys wanted to play with him. It was a good recruit. I mean, I got a call. We had drafted some of the Americans on our list now, like Bobby Sanguinetti, for example. Like they were calling us, like, wow, what did you do to get Bobby up there and stuff like that? And it wasn't a matter of anything, because it was basically just now identifying the American players that were elite players that didn't necessarily, the program just wasn't for them, right? And I became a very, I think between myself and Mark Hunter, there were wanted posters up in Ann Arbor for us because every time we went down to the program there, we walked away with a couple of Americans in Michigan there. I don't think Red Berenson has my picture in his wallet either. Like Trevor Lewis, for example, as well. There was another perfect example. Like Trevor was the most valuable player in the USHL. And the same thing, as soon as the Kings drafted him, and that ended up being my segue into the National Hockey League. But he was like, yeah, I don't want to go to Michigan. I want to go play with Bobby Ryan. And it ended up great. So we ended up with Trevor Lewis for a year, and even some of the part of the trade deadlines, just knowing that you've got that player. And throughout the thing, it was funny. There was never any talk of, even in the tough time, like when the time he was there, like the hardest part for him was, I think that year he was one of those guys that caught in between, that he'd done everything he could do. But as a 19-year-old, he wasn't ready for pro and had to come back. That was the hard motivating year for him, because he truly was ready to play in the American Hockey League, but the rules were the rules, and he had to be returned to junior. And he was great, but he was so much better than anybody else at that time. It was hard to keep him motivated on a daily basis. And that's where my bond with Brian Burke came into fruition, with some extra motivating tactics that we had to use along the way. But so many incredible stories. And I mean, I still am in touch with his dad. His dad, he ended up being just like, his mom passed away last year, bless her soul, but his dad was unbelievable. And there was a great story because his mom and dad couldn't even sit beside each other at the time at the NHL draft, because of it was a restraining order or something like that. And then Bob Senior was adamant he could get up to see a game. So he on his own, he had his ankle bracelet on and all, got across the border, got his way up to Owen Sound, and we had him decked out in an Owen Sound Attack tracksuit, like he was a trainer, sitting at the end. We had him at the end glass, sitting with me watching his son play. And right in front of us, where we come on the ice there in Owen Sound, somebody in London, it was like, I'm pretty sure we were playing London, somebody hit Bobby Sanguinetti from behind, or Sekira from behind, and they were right down in front of us, and a huge scrum started. And the trainers come on the ice, and his dad ran on the ice with the trainers. So I'm looking around, and this is a televised game. And his dad's he's got one knee down, like he's checking on the guy, like for pulse. And then he starts giving it to the ref. And I'm like, oh my God. And Bobby's on the bench just shaking his head. And I'm like, how are we going to destroy this tape? Like his dad is on a nationally televised game. His dad's on the ice giving it to the ref. So anyways, when he got back, he had to do a little extra time for breaking the cross the border rule. But I think they were understanding because it was such a funny story, but it just kind of told you how much the community meant to the family as well.
That's crazy. Bobby got my buddy 31 points. Scott Trigun. I got to name drop him while I can. He put him on that line, and all of a sudden he had 31 tucks. You mentioned everything that was going on, and we're concentrating a lot on Bobby, but I just want to know how, with everything that was going on, how did you orchestrate it, and how did you, along with David Branch, keep that whole story kind of hush hush? Because it didn't come out until, I guess, the last couple of years.
Well, I mean, we knew about it. The first time I found out about it, it was like, and I mean, I'm sharing a lot, but I mean, I literally Googled, because his agent was Mark Guy in Newport Sports, who I had a great relationship with, but they kind of said, Google the name Bob Stevenson, and I did. And it was like, literally, it said America's Most Wanted. Like it was on that list of, and I was like, holy, and it was, I think it was for like attempted murder or something, which I don't want. It was that serious. Everybody knows the story now, but when Bobby told the story, and I think that was why there were so many, that he was so close with his mom, but he really respected his dad. He still had that thing that he didn't want to let his dad down. His dad had obviously pushed him as a player, and he never wanted to let him down. There was still a real bond. It was the whole family. It was incredible. Like the story they were still very much in love, the mom and the dad. It was incredible once they got together, and they had this incredible bond. Although the story is so, it's got a violent side of it that's not fun to talk about at all. But through it all, they loved their son so much. And I think it was still like when she talked about him before she passed, talked about the dad, she just kind of did it with a smile on her face, and how much love she had for them and how much they wanted Bobby to succeed. And he truly is one of the classiest gentlemen that I've ever come across in business, Bobby Ryan Jr. And he just everything. He just handles himself in such a polite fashion. And now it's just like he went through that adversity. And I think that was probably some of the demons that had kind of bottled up inside of him when he had the issue with the substance abuse. And I think now he's just in a great spot. He's a father. He's happily married. I mean, unfortunately got hurt this year with Detroit, but it is a great story. But I felt I had to let the proper people know so they could understand the story. Like, I mean, I didn't want Dave Branch to be finding out about something secondhand years later. And then, but I think a lot of the people in the OHL kind of were aware of the story, but they were trying to, it's just human nature. Some of them were trying to use it more in a competitive way to keep him down and unhappy as opposed to supporting him. And I don't know the lady's name, but Anaheim, he mentions her all the time, and he's mentioned her in all of his speeches. Anaheim sent up a lady, one of their, she was like a psychologist, a sports psychologist that worked with them, and I didn't know her name offhand, but he basically used her like a surrogate mom. And I know she took him through a lot of this process, and there was never any time that we were like, no, like if Bobby needed it, we had that support staff through Anaheim there for him. And it ended up really helping him out in the long run. He was very thankful for that. And again, he's such a grounded kid. I mean, he laughs, like he'll joke now, like what his last contract was something like 7 times $7 million or something. And then he'd be like, he'll send a text like, hey, Fuchs, do you think Vegas is going to pick me up in the expansion draft, making 7 schmil and stuff? And I'm like, I think you're kind of going to be stuck in Ottawa there for a while. And, but he's just, he's just a good person. So I'm glad that he's in a happy place. And I don't think he's done playing yet. He still really loves the game. It's clearly not about money anymore, but he loves the game.
Farzy, we lost you.
You froze, Farzy.
He might have had some technical difficulties over there in that part of Kitchener.
I have this sense if I feel a tough question coming, I have the ability to freeze the box.
I like that. Let's ask you a question. He'll pop back on. But being in Owen Sound and going from Oshawa to that small market, how much of a challenge was it for you to become accustomed with how things worked up there?
Well, I loved it because Oshawa is a small town. It was also a hockey town. So it was very, you were very much identified with, but not nearly the level that I found out in Owen Sound. Like as far as going to the grocery store or just little things that are completely, I mean, at the time I was married, my daughters were born there. I mean, it was like my wife was she'd go, geez, I was in the grocery store today and everybody's asking me about the team. And it was such a tight knit community. I loved it. I thought it was great for me because I learned how to deal with, again, that's the only team that's, you know, like Fred Wallace and at the time William Walker, who's passed. I mean, these guys were on you like you're, you know, like it was the New York Times. And they all had their heart in the right place and stuff like that. But I mean, it gave me an ability to deal with the media at a much smaller level. But I had such a affinity for the community. I truly loved it. Like we'd bought a beautiful home. As I said, my daughters were born there. And I mean, like the ownership group there, they were like, I'm still so connected with them. Like Dr. Bob Severs, who's, you know, thank God he's been battling cancer. He's in a really good spot right now. And then you've got, as far as he quit.
Yeah, he walked away.
I hope those bottles are still closed in the back.
He's back.
Oh, geez, you guys. I'm so sorry.
He's back. I just asked him another question. It's okay.
Oh, good. That's perfect.
We're talking about like, and missed like Curtis McDermott, like Paul McDermott. And
yep,
he was my hockey liaison, right? Because he had the big career and Peter was in there. And at the time, Brian Johnson and Frank Coulter and Faye, they were just wonderful people. And you didn't want to let them down. You just didn't want to let them down. But I still, like, it became like a farm system for me in Los Angeles. Like, I mean, the guys I would draft, like, I mean, the Wayne Simmons, like I remember being on the ice, like Trevor Lewis was there, Brad Richardson was there. Like when we won the Stanley Cup, I was looking around like, hey, this is, boys, we didn't get her done at the OHL level, but this is pretty cool. It's like you've got 3 year attack guys. I hired scouts down there from the group. Like Mike Stuthers was running our farm team. And then, you know, Curtis McDermott comes down. I mean, I talked Curtis into coming as a free agent and he's turned into a National Hockey League player. So there were so many ties for me. Even Joey Hishon. Like, I mean, there was a funny story because Joey ended up winning a championship. He was so, like, he was trying to get drafted by Guelph or Kitchener because that's where he lived, right? And I ended up drafting him and he was so ticked off with me, but Joey wasn't he was like, that's it, I'm going to school. And I'm like, Joey, you've seen your report card. Okay, I love you to death and you're hockey brilliant, but you're going to Owen Sound Secondary School. That's where you're going. So he came up and he loved it and he won a championship, right? And we've remained incredibly close. And he was like, he always says, you know, imagine if you didn't draft me. How, like, it ended up turning, unfortunately, with the concussions and stuff in the OHL finals, but it turned out great for him. I mean, he was a first round NHL pick and he's now coaching up there. So the city must have been that bad for him.
You talk about not getting it done in Owen Sound, but I want to look back on the 05 season. So Bobby Ryan is the cornerstone that you've built around. And when we talk about the 05 season in the Ontario Hockey League, everybody naturally talks about the London Knights with good reason. But until they went and loaded up at the trade deadline, Mike, how close did you think you were?
We were really close, and that was a great team. But it was so weird. It was like our year. It was weird looking at all year. They were ranked number 1 in Canada, and we were ranked number 2, right? And then it's funny because Kitchener. I mean, I think we lost to Kitchener, didn't we? Did we end up
first round? Yeah.
It was like, and that's when I learned what the Mike Richards phenomenon was about. You know what I mean? And I end up winning a Stanley Cup with Mike Richards. Like, I mean, the day that everything is so interchanged, it's like we end up beating Peter DeBoer in the Stanley Cup championship with Mike Richards and a bunch of hockey's that way. Like, we thought for sure that team, we were built to get by the Rangers in the first round, and he single-handedly, and we got so caught up with what's his name, Adam, I think it was Adam Keefe, running around, that what we've learned, instead of, and Mike Richards was going after, they were going after our skill guys and we were going after their tough guys. And it's like, it made no sense. We got so caught up in it, and it was that was probably the toughest loss for me in the Ontario Hockey League with the team we had. But it also showed you what true greatness is out of Mike Richards. Like, I mean, I talk to Ricky when I can still, because they're, for me, I remember coaching him in the under 17s, and he was injured and he still came up to the All-Star game because I said, listen, the fans really need to see you, right? And I think Kitchener didn't want him to come because he was on crutches or something like that, and it wasn't a good look. I don't even remember what the injury was, but he still came to the All-Star game and sat in and allowed the fans to get to meet Mike Richards. So I just thought this guy, and still to this day, I think he's one of the most true, best leaders I've ever been around at any level. So looking back on it, as much as it sucked, you see the guys that were the key components in those areas. Like with Corey Perry used to fight Mike Richards, and they're buddies. Like there was a level of throwdown and compete with that group of Ontario Hockey League players. It was just charged second to none. And I give them all the credit in the world. And then the next year when we were supposed to lose, we end up winning in Kitchener. I still remember the overtime goal. And that's I think when Pete and I and Spotter had, like I grew up Spotter, like we was my right winger and Henry Carr, but it was this thing of that. Okay, Kitchener broke our hearts the year before, and I was throwing rose petals at them. And the next year, we broke their hearts, and they wouldn't talk to me. I was like, guys, I understand the difference between the Red Sox and the Seattle Mariners, but the Yankees and the Seattle Mariners, but give us some credit here. And to this day, I mean, that rivalry, like when we were going through our coaching change in Los Angeles, Dean Lombardi gave me an assignment, said, tell me who the next best coach is. Who's the next guy? And I said, without a question, it's Pete DeBoer in my mind. I said, he's brilliant. I love the job he's done. And we actually met Pete, and it was like an old Humphrey Bogart movie. It was a mid-season. That's how I learned too, if you're going to make a coaching change mid-season, how difficult it is, because you don't want people to see you're talking, and you have to meet the person in person. I remember being at the airport, like the Sheridan Airport Hotel, right in the middle of the airport, in some dark corner where I just put Pete DeBoer and Dean Lombardi in the corner, and then I just kind of was on guard to make sure nobody saw that they could interview. But I think Pete at that time, I mean, we were good friends then, and we're much closer now, but I think he understood then how much I respected him and respected the competitive nature of it. And actually as a coach, and Spotter and I go way back, but Pete and I became a lot closer after that. And then it was so strange to think about the past we've come, and now here I am. I've gone from, and we joked about this because I went from Owen Sound, and now I'm living on Manhattan Beach in Los Angeles, and he's in New Jersey. And I'm like, which is kind of like, I'm now in Kitchener, and he's kind of like in Owen Sound. And we just talked just the superlatives where the and obviously Jersey has incredible. We were just talking climate and stuff like that, not because Blue Lamorello had many cups, but it was really tough and gratifying, obviously, to win the cup, or first Stanley Cup. But it was like looking at the bench, I was still just shaking my head at that rivalry, thinking, wow, I can't shake these guys. Here we are in the NHL. I got Spot and Peter on the other, and those relationships have developed, like even like with Mike Vellucci and stuff like that. Mike Foligno and I remain incredibly close. So there's just so many. I mean, that's what the OHL for me. The relationship's just incredible, just absolutely incredible. And especially coming in for me, because I mean, I'd played Germany, and I mean, I had great university career. I kind of blew a scholarship up. I played some good hockey in Europe, but coming into the OHL, you go in that first meeting, it's like the who's who of, there's Sherry Basson, who, you've seen on the OHL coverage, and there's Dave Branch, and there's Bert Templeton, and Brian Kilray, and Larry Mavety. And I just gravitated to those guys, and it was out of respect, but I was very chirpy with them. And I remember the first night I went out for some pops with Mavety and Killer. I probably took me about 3 or 4 days to get over it, but they were true legends, like true legends. And I actually went up when Bert Templeton when I got fired from St. Mike's, I went up with Bert. He was fading from cancer, and I went up and spent some time with him because I wanted to rub shoulders with the legends and learn what it was all about. And I became really close with Mav. And when I'd go into Kingston to scout Kingston, when I was with the Kings, I'd sit with Larry Mavety. And when I'd go in to Ottawa, Brian Kilray would pick me up, and we'd sit and have our time together. So those guys were such incredible, and they're different. I mean, obviously times have changed. It's not like when I got on the bus with the Kings, I'd fire up a cigar and put on an NFL game. But it was such to learn that those guys and how much they meant to the game of hockey, and still do. It was just a great experience for me. And the other guy was obviously Sherry Basson, became like a complete mentor for me. So
what was that night like when you were out for those beers?
It's surprised how many beers I could drink, but it's like, you just look at the size of like some of their guts, like Mavic just throws them back like it's like popcorn. And then I got this thing where they had me doing this. We used to have the referee. It was like they were trying to bring the referees and the management teams and the coaches together, so we'd be a little bit more kumbaya. these social things, and they decided what a good idea would be. Branchy and Ted Baker said, Fuchs, why don't you get up and say a few words, like have a little bit of a roast, right? And so I went up and the gloves were off, and I went I remember, what I say, I bugged Stan Butler about his dress attire, so he didn't talk to me for a couple of years, and then a couple of refs were there, and I said, the golf tournament went well, but it was two referees ended up tied, but we couldn't do the playoffs because we know you guys aren't allowed to do playoffs. And I specifically named the refs, and so I had enough enemies. And I know Mav, I did that, like that Johnny Carson sis boom ba, and I'd go like 30 kilometers, and then they go the amount of kilometers Larry Mavity puts on his car scouting per year. So we had a lot of laughs, and some guys are a little bit better at self-depreciating humor than others, but it was great. It was a good bond session for us. And I know that like Killer just used to think that was the most fun moments ever, but those social nights, those guys are veterans. Like, they know what they're doing. Like, the next morning, I'm literally sitting there with my head pounding at the morning meeting, and they're just like, hey, what are you doing tonight? And I'm like, I'm good tonight. I'm good tonight.
There's another big name in coaching that's still going at it in the Ontario Hockey League, and you were an assistant with him in Oshawa. That would be Mr. George Burnett. What did you learn working with George?
Well, that opposites attract. Because I went from being, as Sherry Basson, he says, you think you're I thought I was running good practices, and I thought, like, I didn't have that bench. I was like 27 years old as a head coach of an expansion team, and we were getting outshot like 62-10 every night. I got Mark. Thank God I brought Mark Osborne in, because he really helped me. Like, my practices were, I had the Sheldon Keefe, the Sheldon Keefe, Dave Frost group was they put a few years on my belt at the time there too. So that was an interesting time. But to come in with George all of a sudden, I watched the first practice, and I was like, this guy's a machine. Like, first of all, he had a teaching background, but the way he broke down practices and how each drill had a purpose towards your system and stuff like that. And he was dry. I mean, dry in a lot of senses. He had a very dry sense of humor. He didn't drink at all, which is very different from the Mav and Killer. So our personalities, but we really hit it off. And he was very much, he molded me very much. And I was on the bench with him, and we had Joe Sorella, who was up top. And I think he started to identify my passion for the scouting side of things. And there were teams calling, like at the time, I think it was Sudbury and Sarnia had called to get permission about, here, you want another shot at being a head coach. And I was like, if I had gone that route, I'd be done. And they were like, if you get a chance, like, I'd already got my in with the under 17 programs, which George was really promoting as far as being, I coached for a little bit, but as far as being part of the management staffs and the management crews there, and we had great success with that. And for me, that was like insider trading on having all the top players. And now how Mike Richards ticks when you're like, our number one line was Mike Richards, Anthony Stewart, and Nathan Horton at the one tournament. I think Jeff Carter was on our third line or something like that. So when you start to get around these guys, and the reason we lost because Paul Bissonnette was our number one defenseman. I love telling. Here's another one that I had the fortune of having in Owen Sound, and then he won a Calder Cup with us down in the States. But it was I learned so much from George. I think I was a good balance for him because of how much the guys could come to me, and I was a lot looser. Who's kidding who? You guys have met George. It's not like sometimes it's like pulling a tooth, getting a word out of him, but he's a wonderful human being who's got hockey knowledge coming well of the zoo. He'd already coached in the National League in Edmonton, and he loved the game, and he loved to golf, and we got along incredibly well. And he really pushed me to go to Owen Sound to the next level. And I owe everything to him and Bass for really promoting me and believing in me to do that. And I still call him coach. I watched him last year and watched the magic he wove with them with the Guelph team. And everywhere he goes, he wins, right? Everywhere he goes, he wins. And again, he's still dry. He's still George. but I can get him laughing. I remember once I had him in hysterics, and I thought it'd be a great time to run out and grab my parents and bring him down to see him laughing his head off. And by the time I got back, he was already he was back to no Smiley George. So I'd blown my moment.
We never have a problem getting a word out of him. He always gives us like 5-6 minute long answers. It's been great. You mentioned
he's just awesome. Just awesome.
You've mentioned Sherry obviously numerous times. What's that relationship like? You called him a mentor, and you did a great impression, by the way.
Well, that's another guy. I did the impression with the full hip walk and stuff at the, I had him down to a science, but Bass is like a second father for me. I mean, and he literally, because he truly cared, and he tells it like it is, but you've got to be prepared to listen to the same story 7 or 8 times. Like it's fresh. And he always tells it like it's the first time you've heard it. So, but again, I mean, he was a mentor on how you, like the amount, like he had such pride in, even Frankie J, who I mean has passed on. He was his top scout, and you just learned so much sitting in the crowd from Frankie about what it's like to evaluate a player. But Bass was about building a team and identifying character and how important character was. And again, I mean, he's like an icon for what was done in the Ontario Hockey League, the success he had. And then I always bug him when he's like, just like he drafted Connor McDavid, and I'm like, I said, did you even put that on your resume? That's like me saying, yeah, well, you know what? I drafted Drew Doughty. Yeah, well, as to quote Bass, he goes, you can make that pick from a newspaper. So, yeah. So, but he's, I mean, I know he had some health issues, but we talk about everything. I mean, he was at my wedding, and I still remember him. I think Dave was there too. I remember Bass. I didn't know whether it was a dance or it was just him walking, because when that hip gives out, it looks like he's kind of got a little of that Donald Trump dance routine. But he had a great time. And then I had Eric Lindros at my wedding too, so that was a nice component.
Did you put them at the same table?
Those things I had to really spread out the tables, just in case the Quebec incident came up at the wedding. So it was something. So he's a special man, and again, he keeps filled with energy. I still think he'd love to be a part of a team. Like, I don't know why an Ontario team wouldn't want to pick him up as a consultant if they could deal with if George's 6-minute answers, Bass is like 36. He's a great man.
You touched on it earlier, Mike, the Owen Sound connections that were still there or were there in LA that, you know, as you went into the National Hockey League, and of course, as you win those Stanley Cups, what's it like, you know, in your role, director of player personnel, lead scouting, winning a Stanley Cup in the pros?
I can't put it into words. I can't. I get emotional because I really felt that I'd let Owen Sound down. I think I was just happy because we didn't cross the line. We were on the berth. Everybody, there was no problem with people report, but I felt, you know, they had just offered me a 5-year contract to stay. And here I am. I was leaving unfinished business behind, but I was not the challenge ahead was like, I knew that when Dean pulled me in and said, right now we're the Owen Sound of the NHL. And you did such a good job building the culture through the players that we've got to build a culture here where it's not about guys come here to play because they want to be on the beach and their wives want to shop at Rodeo Ride. We want them to come here to win Stanley Cups. And it was fun because I had a lot of insider knowledge on guys that I'd been through the wars with. And I mean, Don Cherry said it. He goes, and I'm not because it's your staff, myself and Marky and Eddie, but he said Mike Futa built an Ontario Hockey League All-Star team in Los Angeles. And they were all my guys. It was like Pearson, Toffoli. Okay, we're going to trade Simmons and Shanner feuds, but you're bringing back Mike Richards. Okay, we're going to trade for Jeff Carter. You know, Doughty, they're all Jake Muzzin. I was like, the name Brad Richardson, Trevor Lewis. It was incredible looking around the room at seeing the guys that I had been up through the battles with were now wearing the same jersey, and then to win it. Oh, it's everything goes through your mind. I mean, because in the way we won it too the first time around, we went up 3-0 in every series. So, and each game was a battle, but when you have that much, we were never, if you lose tonight, you're done. Right. And then in the last game when finally New Jersey got it to 3-2, we got a 5-minute major and our power play was cold and we were at home and we scored I think we scored 5 on the power play or something. And it was like, so we were winning 5-0 after the first period. So now you got 40 minutes where that's going through your head. Like, you think you're pretty sure you're going to win, and then it goes, what are you going to do? I can't believe this. You're emotional about Owen Sound. You're emotional about your family. You're like, what am I going to do with the cup? I'm bringing it to Owen Sound. That's the first thing that I'm bringing it to Owen Sound. And it's the first place I went with it. I brought it to Owen Sound. I brought my daughters in a big limousine with my mom. My dad was actually in Malaysia at the time teaching school, and brought it right to Owen Sound. We took it to downtown Owen Sound, and all those people, I wanted them to know that this is a part of me, right? Your community. This is where my daughters were born. And if you hadn't allowed me, if you hadn't handed me the keys to the car with this program, I could never have experienced this. And that's what it was all about. And then to win it the second time, I mean, once you win it once, you wonder, well, maybe I'll never. And then we went to the conference final the next year, and then the next year we won it again. And I'm like, wow. And if we hadn't had so many self-inflicted wounds, like Slava Voyanov, who at the time was just a little bit behind Drew Doughty, that's how good he was, and on a great contract. And then Mike Richards had his problems, and Jarrett Stoll got in a little trouble. So we had all these self-inflicted wounds that I think took us away from at least another run, like another good, like we were that deep and everybody was on great contracts. And then once that happened, we had to find a guy to fill Slava's spot, which we couldn't do. And then we overpaid Marian Gaborik instead of just winning the first, and then you lose Justin Williams, and all of a sudden you see those pieces that were such glue falling apart. But nobody can take away what you did. And what we accomplished as a team. I still think about those days. And when you start to go back in the pictures, you just well up, but it's so exciting. It's even like you're going on the ice. The first time I'm like, oh my God, what if I can't lift it? What if it's too heavy? And then they hand it to you and you could literally twirl it around like I was going to fire it into the crowd. It's just like feathers. It's feathers. And then your day with the cup, you've got like everybody's, yeah, maybe I'll keep it small. No, maybe I'll keep it at about 500. You call every friend you have. And it's like I said, because I mean, I'm a big cardio guy, but I've had some upper body surgery. So I literally, in the rules with the cup, you have to be the person to pour it and carry it and stuff like on the day. So the next day I carried it and poured so many drinks out of the cup. I literally needed to go to a chiropractor. My upper body was so sore. I remember because the second day I was handing it off to Tyler Toffoli, which is it's just an incredible story when you've known a kid since Pee-wee and now you're handing them the Stanley Cup. And it was incredible, just an incredible feeling. And again, that's why for me, I'm one of those guys, there's a lot of guys in hockey that really piss me off because they don't like to see other people succeed in their own shallow way. It's about, if I can't have it, you can't have it. Whereas I'm like, I want Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott to win a Stanley Cup. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't want them to win it at my expense, but those are guys that deserve it. You know what I mean? They deserve it. And so that's the way I look at things. Like if I see a team, like when I see a team like St. Louis hosted, and my director of scouting from Ian McClellan, who I recommended to the St. Louis Blues, who's now a Stanley Cup champion, that's the first call I make, or to Billy Armstrong. Like there's some people you're not as happy for because there's some people that just aren't happy for other people, but the people that are good people in this, and there's a ton of them, when they get a chance to experience that, you just got to feel great for them. It's just such an incredible experience. And that's why somebody made the comment to me, and they would said, you got to be really pissed off with Owen Sound winning. And I went, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Pissed off. I said, I'm the happiest, like outside of that organization. They finished the novel for me. That's what was supposed to happen. So there wasn't an ounce of, oh man, they got it done without me. It was, they got it done. Because that same ownership group that took me under their wing and allowed me to build the program, they deserve that. And that community deserved that.
I remember reading somewhere about a LA Kings defenseman upon seeing Drew Doughty in the dressing room for the first time, questioning, who the heck did we draft? Look at this. And then on the ice, he went, my bad. This player is good. Did you get any pushback or was there any worry on your end when it came to Drew Doughty and his off ice?
There was never, when he was in Guelph and I heard what his weight was, and when he told me what he ate after games, there was a little bit of a concern. But what Drew has, you can't teach. And he's got hockey sense is an often heard word, but when you combine that, he's one of the most competitive human beings that I've ever been around in anything. Like he hates to lose. So I remember, and he hates the story because we've told it over and over again, but he wasn't chiseled granite coming out of Guelph. He was like, and it was crazy because he was playing like, we have one ISO where he changes after about a 5-minute shift and the puck goes down to the other end and the puck comes back and he's back on the ice already. So they're actually, you don't have time to turn the camera off because he was only on the bench from the transition from the out and he was back on again. So it was concerning to me that a kid that was playing 35 minutes a night was putting on weight. That was a bit of, but we put this challenge to him that, listen, we know Stamkos is going first overall. Drew, just get yourself, once you get that body, what you do, it's like Toffoli. Same thing with Toffoli. Like he didn't exactly look like ravishing Rick Rude without his shirt on when we got him either. But by the end of it, this guy's, once he gets himself in NHL shape and starts looking after his body, now everything that nobody else can do naturally, he does naturally because he's got the tools. And you've got to put in that work. And Drew is getting by just being in shape. Like he'd come in, I guess what you call it, you say skinny fat. Like he'd come in and the fitness tests were not pretty. But the first combines, he looked, because they all came out in Under Armour, and he was so excited. He just looked, he had lost like 25 pounds for the combines. And then Zach Bogosian came out. I think they played like the Ultimate Warrior music as he came out, like throwing dumbbells all over the place. And there's Drew doing his flex, whatever the thing. But he got through it. And then he started to put muscle on. And his first few fitness tests were, from a pro standpoint, they weren't good. But he got on the ice and people were like, oh my God. That's like, this guy's painting Picasso's out here. I don't care what his body looks like. But of course, I think now Drew's seen it. Like he had a little bit of, every time he has a little fallback, he starts to take that level of fitness to another level, to the point he's in the best shape of his life. Now he will say that the best shape of Drew Doughty's life still isn't going to get you on the front of a magazine. But when you combine the competitiveness, now his body's in a, I just said, Drew, imagine what you're going to be able to do if you have the best cardio and you are a little stronger, because he likes to hit too, right? So if you're hitting like that and you don't have the proper shoulder strength, it's going to hurt you as much as it's hurting the other guy. And he bought into it. And it's, I mean, as I said, I just sat there and marveled, and they did such a good job always having a, like, I remember he's made so many guys, like he's the millionaire maker, right? Like who, but he had Sean O'Donnell first, who was a great mentor for him. And then, Willie Mitchell. And then all of a sudden, it's just insert name here. Every guy that he got to be defense partner with became a millionaire. Like Brady McNabb, millions. He's like, I want to be Drew Doughty's partner. Like, right, like he had the great guys, like Rob Scuderi was a great mix. And then I think we brought in Derek Forbert, same thing. I want to play with Drew Doughty. Okay. Everybody wants to play with Drew Doughty because it's the same thing you said. You're going to get cookies because he's going to set you up, and you're going to probably be plus 30 or 40 because that's the way he does it. But I know he's going through a tough time now because he doesn't like to lose, but it wasn't quite as bad as some of the other guys, like as far as their overall fitness, because again, but it wasn't an NHL ready physique, put it that way.
You talked about how happy you were for the Owen Sound Attack when they finally captured that championship. And you also referenced that sort of sense of unfinished business when you turned down their contract extension, because you knew it was time for that next challenge for you. But 07 in Owen Sound too was a year that you put something together that you thought was going to be a championship team, and it just didn't work out. How many times do you replay that over?
The last, like, it kills me because I learned a really hard lesson. You don't owe anybody. Like sometimes you're trying to do the right thing because it's a quick story because it actually helped Kitchener out. But Peter Simicallis was on waivers, right? And I thought Peter Simicallis would be a perfect fit for Bobby Ryan. And I actually flew down to watch him because I knew he wasn't playing in the minor leagues in the American League, and saw what I saw, and I wanted him badly. And I knew he was going on waivers, and David Clarkson was on the team at the time. And as soon as David Clarkson saw me, I knew the Kitchener Rangers were going to get a phone call. Like, what the hell is Mike Futa doing? And I remember what the heck they were. It was Utica or something, wherever the Devils farm team was. So I knew Kitchener would be on to me. And he went on waivers, and all I had to do was claim him. And I called Brad Selwood to tell him, I got to do this. And he just went off on me. If you can't do that, I'm going to look like he's not going to come and report to the Oshawa Generals, and all of a sudden you're going to get him. He's going to come to Owen Sound. And he talked me out of it. And I should never let him. talked me out of it, because I was just doing my job and I didn't blame Peter. And sure enough, when he had his choice, he's a Kitchener Ranger 3 weeks later. And that's good recruiting on their part, but I could have blocked that. And in the interim, I just completely screwed up. I got a call. I trusted an agent that I was supposed to get a kid named Thomas Kanya, who was a second round NHL pick, was supposed to report, who was going to take up an overage spot and a European spot. So it was 2 slots. So I remember moving my European at the time out to Guelph, who I can't remember his name at this stage, but I traded Igor Gongalski to clear up a spot, who was he was an overage, but he was the perfect fit for us. He ended up scoring 40 goals the next year. And I just ended up, and all of a sudden Thomas Kanya, agent, says, no, he's going to finish the year in Europe. He's getting too much money. Simicallis. So I didn't even have, here's a team that's supposed to be built to win. And I only had 2 overages. So that's on me. And I just learned a lesson from it, because I was trying to be man up with Brad Selwood, when all I should have just claimed him and said, Brad, I'll make this up to you down the road. Because I know he was like, oh my God, he had such a hate on for the Kitchener Rangers that he was like, if I had known that they were going to end up with him, you should have taken him. And I'm like, bro, really, Brad? Let's roll back that conversation. So anyways, and it was just one of those things. I left that team shorthanded. I did. And there was other things, but I also learned a little bit about listening to your coach, because we were always like, when we finally hit it out of the park with Mike Uzis, but we never really had that goalie that brought fear into people's minds. And sure enough, we went on the road once, and I mean, Anthony Guadagnolo, God bless him, great kid, but he shut us out in Windsor, and our coaches came back. We have found it. We found Johnny Bauer stuck in Patrick Waugh stuck in this, and I made a deal that I never wanted to make. And I said the only thing that didn't make it the worst trade in the history of hockey, or in my career anyways, is because Josh Bailey played in the NHL as a 19-year-old. But I ended up trading Josh Bailey to the Windsor Spitfires for Anthony Guadagnolo. And Josh and I are still very close, and he's probably about to play his 1000th NHL game. And it was just one of those ones. And then 2 weeks later, the coaches come in and go, Guadagnolo doesn't have it, eh? I'm just like, I just remember that, just going, as a coach, do what your coach, listen to your coaches a bit, but you build the team and then let them coach it. You let them coach it. And that's at the NHL level. You certainly, you want to make sure you're bringing in somebody that Daryl Sutter or insert name here is going to be happy with. But if you're sold on somebody and you've done all your homework and it's going to make your team better, that's my job. And then let your coach the team. He does the lineups and he coaches the team. So it was a good lesson for all of us.
You mentioned almost 1,000 games for Josh. Mark Giordano's almost at 1,000 games. What did he mean to that franchise in Owen Sound?
Well, he mean everything. I mean, for me, because we joke all the time because he's never been drafted yet. Mm-hmm. It's a great story. I mean, I remember getting there and seeing his name, and they're like, you got to go recruit this guy. Because I think Frank Carnevale had started a process with him, and Frank was let go. And then Mark was going to Ferris State on a scholarship, and he was playing like single A hockey, and I went and saw him, and I was like, this just kid, what is he playing here for? And he had a real, I call it, it's like an Italian beach body. I say he was built like an Academy Award. So he was, but he was, Peter Mavroudis, another hockey lifer, brought me to the house, and I met the family, and I just fell in love with the family, and they put their trust in me. It was very similar to the Wayne Simmons story. And I signed him we signed him to yet 3 years of education for 2 years of service. So we had to guarantee him an overage year, and the rest is history. He came up, he did, his equipment didn't match. The owners were like, he looked like he just came out of Westwood Rink 4 in a 10 o'clock at night game. And I'm telling the trainers, get him some equipment. Like Paul McDermott's like, what is this? Like, he literally looked like a garage league player. And he ends up, I mean, by Christmas, he was our best defenseman. His 20-year-old year, he was OHL defenseman, overage player of the year, I think it was. And then the guy that just kept coming in, and I couldn't convince people that this guy was, like, he was thinking about where should I go to school, Futs, and like use his CIS stuff. And I'm like, no. There, and this Tom Webster came in, and Tommy, another one, unfortunately he's passed. He just loved this kid. And I said, Tommy, this kid will not make you look bad. And he brought him to Calgary, and they signed him as an unfree. He wasn't drafted again. And they signed him. And then he stood up for himself. And it was funny because it brings names from the past. Daryl Sutter was his coach, general manager, and he called me and he's like, Feuds, they're really lowballing me here. I think I'm going to have to go to Russia for a year. And can you ask Dean Lombardi what his advice would be? And I said, well, you got to be careful because this isn't tampering, but I asked what advice. And he said, stay. Daryl's great. And I mean, I said, well, you don't want to piss off your NHL general manager. And he did his homework and he went to Russia, played a year, came back. He was a different player because I think skating on the big surface, he was a lot leaner. And the rest is he just took off. I mean, Daryl loved him. He was whatever. I mean, last year we were joking about Norris Trophy winner. Like, come on, Gio. You're still not even drafted. But he's like, I love him. His family's still wonderful and amazing. He'll call me. Like, I think he was probably one of the first people when I won the first cup, the second cup. He's like, you got 2 cups. Like, come on, you get 2 cups. He goes, I don't care. And I said, well, I never played. It's not like I can trade you a cup for your Norris. But and I think what makes me most proud, and I've said this, is the quality of the people that I was so fortunate. And that's what made it easy for me. And I think that's why we turn things around, is because bringing in a guy like a Wayne Simmons, and his story is what it is, and Mark Giordano, these quality people, and even like your Scotty Trigunas and stuff like that. We had such great kids. And then they're when I'm watching the NHL awards and they're having I don't know whether it was the Messier Award for basically leadership in the community and basically the best person. And the finalists are Mark Giordano, Wayne Simmons, and Justin Williams, who's now one of my best friends in the game. That was one of the most satisfying moments ever, because look what they've become as men, right? Not only are they obviously done very well financially, but they're like pillars of the community. And it's easy for them because it's just natural for them.
You mentioned a name that I had wanted to ask you about specifically too, Mike, and that is Wayne Simmons, because I remember a night many years ago where I was doing a post-game show after a game in Kitchener, and Wayne was the victim of a really ugly incident that I don't think we need to rehash during an NHL exhibition in London. But you called into the post-game show that night to talk about Wayne Simmons. So I think that just speaks volumes about the character that you saw. What would you say about Wayne Simmons and especially his overcoming of adversity through the career?
Well, Dean Lombardi called him my son, and he's clearly not my son. So when I met Wayne, Kenny Cook and Chris Byrne had said, you got to go watch this kid in Brockville. And I actually called Sheldon Keefe about him, because this was the first time Kiefer and I had talked since our days together at St. Mike's, and he was coaching against him. And I went in and I was like, wow. And he'd been cut by the Mississauga Ice Dogs as a walk-on. And I just fell in love with him, but I couldn't believe the stuff he was doing. He's still at 145 pounds. So I went and met his family. And I've told the story, but I'll try and keep it really condensed. But basically, there was hardly any electricity at the house. And he had a scholarship to Bowling Green. And his brother was there too. And the story kind of came out. And his parents were both there. And they're like basically telling me, our son's going to Bowling Green and you're taking away his education. Like, there was nothing about the hockey side. You're taking away our son finally. And they told me the story how I guess the brother could have played in the CFL, but they could only afford one set of equipment, and they decided it was going to be Wayne playing hockey. So I made them a commitment that I'd take care of their son. And we drafted him, I think 5th or 6th round. I knew he was coming. He came up. And I mean, honestly, for a black kid to come up in Owen Sound, there's not a lot of black kids in Owen Sound, and it's a small town. He had some real problems adjusting to the league. He had some bad body language. Stutz was really tough on him. And I just pulled him in and just gave it to him. It was just about the body language, because you could just tell he wasn't happy. And if he wasn't happy, it was going to hard to get him to where we want him to go. And he made a concerted effort to just start being Wayne trained, be Simmer. And you could see the smile and the personality come out. And then in 1 week, I don't really remember the week because I know we played Kitchener one game. He had and I know Brian Burke was up for one of the games. He was the OHL player of the week, but it wasn't even close. He had something like 8 goals, 3 fights, like 5 points, and they were clinics. And I also knew how tough he was too. And that was something that he had to start doing. And then the hard part is Simmer wasn't getting a lot of play with the NHL teams. And then all of a sudden I got offered the job to leave. And he was devastated. He was so ticked off with me because we had a deal. I was going to take care of him. And I went down to Los Angeles for my interview, and part of my interview process, they showed me their Ontario list and said, is there anything out of sorts here? And I went, well, you don't have Wayne Simmons on your list. And they said, well, where would you put him? And I said, number 2, behind Sam Gagner. And they were like, whoa. And of course, Dean Lombardi, I won't use the exact words. He was like, this guy thinks you're an effing idiot. He goes, you don't even have the second best player in the Ontario Hockey League on your list. Well, he's going to be the director of amateur scouting. He basically throws me in with a bunch of NHL guys and scouts, and that's how he introduced me, that I think they're all idiots. So I basically was given this task of putting a video production in and showing them. And at the time, they just made changes. So it was Owen Sound is not a favorable place to go scout, right? So if you're running around late in the season, it's not like you're going to get up to Owen Sound. And they were out of the playoffs at the time and stuff. So I put a presentation together, and all of a sudden, here's Wayne Simmons. I think he was at number 11 on our list overall. And I'm telling Wayne Simmons that I apologize, Wayne. This is too big a decision for my family. He goes, well, are you ever going to draft me? I said, no. I said, we'll invite you as a free agent walk-on, or we'll see where the cards fall. And, but I can't, because Dean said, you can't tell him how much you like him, or now other teams are going to find out. So Wayne just stopped talking to me, period. And then we get to the draft, and first Dean says, where do you want to take him? And of course, me being inexperienced at this, I said, well, nobody's really calling about him, so you can probably get him later. And Dean just lost his marbles on me. He goes, what do you call me, an effing hump or whatever? He goes, you just convinced us that this kid's the 11th best player in the draft, and now you're going to show you're going to try and hide him later in the draft. I'll get out of my office. So we had another meeting. I came back and he goes, where are you going to take him? And I went right where he is in the list. So as fate would have it, we had a compensation pick at this end of the second round. Wayne almost was so close in the list that he could have been the first round pick. They made one adjustment. Dean said, listen, I'll give you one. The guys in the staff were really high on a player called Oscar Moeller at the time. So he was taken in the second round, and we had a pick at the end of the second round. And Dean said, what do you think? And I go, yeah. So everybody just pushed the microphone my way. Like, yeah, we believe you. We believe you. And I'm like, the Los Angeles Kings take from the Owen Sound Attack, Wayne Simmons. And sure enough, of course, the first thing is Steve Spott sends to this day. The text blows up. I hope you didn't sell your house in Owen Sound. That's spotter. And then through this case, the only guy, Pete DeBoer, sends me a text. Like, it blew up. Like, are you kidding me? Second round, Wayne Simmons? Are you kidding me? And then Wayne's agent calls and says, Wayne just about crashed his car because he can't believe it, Futa. You told him you weren't drafting him. I said, I was told I couldn't tell him I was going to draft him. So not only is Wayne, excited, so he goes down there and comes into training. He almost made training camp as an 18-year-old. He beat somebody up. And at the time, Dean couldn't believe, because his vertical jump and his strength was like somebody who should be like 190 pounds, but he was still only 100. We were like, if we ever get Wayne with his power numbers, if you can ever get him to 165 pounds, he's going to be a beast. And he didn't protect the puck well. Our development guys worked on that, and he went back, and I helped orchestrate a trade to get him to Sault Ste. Marie. He wins a gold medal with the World Junior. He comes back, and I mean, whatever, he's almost 1,000 games. He was, it was devastating. That was when Dean called me in his office and said, Futs, I got good news and bad news. The good news is we're getting your guy, Mike Richards. The bad news is I got to trade your son and Braden Shen. And I'm like, I was just like, and that's what another learning curve for me, because when they're on a list and they're just numbers, they're just assets, right? They're just draft names. But when they become part of your family, then they become so much more than that. They're no longer, they're your boys, they're your family. So to have them move on, and then to see obviously what an icon he became in Philly, and then really disappointing for me that he didn't get the contract he deserved there. But he was an NHL All-Star, and he got to come back to Los Angeles as an NHL All-Star. So that was pretty special. And obviously he's a father now, and he's a Toronto Maple Leaf. And we had a lot of discussion over the summer about that. And I just love him. I'm so proud of him. Now Braden Shen calls me and says, Futs, I've got my ring now. We got to get Simmer a ring. He goes, because everybody always said, they always used to get it when they were on their run in Philadelphia. The media was trying to say the Kings, like, I actually remember watching the interview where they were like, when Simmer was an All-Star, they were like, look at right now, you've got Shen, like Mike Richards doesn't play anymore, and you guys are like tearing it up here in Philly. Philly won the trade, and Simmer basically told the guy to F off. Won the trade. They won 2 Stanley Cups. Are you kidding? Won the trade. So it was just the honesty that comes out and the competitive nature. But he's just, I mean, how cool would it be for him being a Toronto kid to come back full circle? And I mean, I don't want to jinx that team who seems to always find a way to get it not done, but I'm really excited about the group they've put together. And for Wayne Simmons to win the Stanley Cup as a Toronto Maple Leaf would be something.
Their head coaches came up numerous times in this conversation. What was it like back in the day with the Frost Five in St. Mike's?
I'm not going to get into it too much. It was a challenge.
Yeah.
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I mean, the story, you guys, somebody can read a book about what was going on, but out of what Frost was doing was absolutely despicable. I mean, I used to laugh because I had the best power play in the league and I had nothing to do with it. I mean, he's up in the crowd doing the Macarena and these guys are changing spots on the ice and going all over the place. And I had no control over him and it was embarrassment for me. It could have ended my career. But what I will tell you is that out of that group, Ryan Barnes got his life together. He's a great agent, great father, great coach. Sean Cation, I understand, is a police officer out east. He's got his life together. Sheldon Keefe reached out to me. We started just exchanging kind of pleasantries and like, how's this kid in your league? How's this? Because he knew he knew what he had done, like what he'd done for my life. And when we had to trade them all to Barrie and stuff and the questions that I was being asked and then hearing all the other stuff on top of it. And we just got together and we talked about it. And he said, hey, do you think I could ever get in the Ontario Hockey League? And I said, I went up and I said, listen, you got to make peace with Dave Branch. So I called Dave and I said, Dave, and I mean, Dave was not pleased with the call. I mean, everybody knows where he was shunned at the handshake there when the Memorial Cup. And I said, Dave, I've spent some quality time here. I would never do this unless I'm sure that this guy's legitimately got his life around and he's nothing to do with the other guy. And I ended up just got them together and Dave called me and said, Futs, that was awesome. That was really good. He's come a long way as a young man and we kind of buried the hatchet. And then Kyle was going through some changes up there with Whitey Stapleton, I think up in Sault Ste. Marie, and he reached out and asked me about Sheldon. And I said, I'm sold. I mean, I know he's now, Dave would be okay with it because they've buried the hatchet. And Sheldon went up and he and Kyle hit it off. And I've never looked back from it. I mean, because I think I like stories that end with a happy ending. I know other people want to give nobody a second chance or something. But when I saw him and his wife and his kids together, then I was sold that this guy's got his life together. And unfortunately, on the other end of it, like Mike Danton / Jefferson reached out to me with the same kind of, hey, Futs, I know, and I met with him and stuff, and I just wasn't there. I just didn't think, I think there was still a connection between him and Dave, and I just couldn't do it. But that being said, I've got Mike Danton on my Instagram, or I love him. I mean, he was one of the most competitive kids. He's a great dad. He's got great kids. And I mean, it's a shame that people can get manipulated at that age, and it could have got a lot worse for a lot of people. So to think that someone can turn the corner, that's why when I hear some of these guys, I see Sheldon's the coach of Toronto Maple Leafs. When some people are talking about some of these other issues that nobody deserves a second chance. Nobody deserves a second chance. Well, you know what? If you've really turned your life around and you're really sincere about it, yeah, I think you did deserve a second chance. So what he's done, I think, is awesome. I think he's a great coach. I think he's very respectful of the game now. And I mean, looks good on him. I mean, I still think it's a tough market to be in. I mean, as much as he's had a great year, if they don't win, he's going to be coming out of it. They're going to be in all the scrutiny that comes with being a Toronto Maple Leaf with a team that they've kind of done a good job on. But I'm excited for him. I mean, between Sheldon, Wade Simmons, Jake Muzzin, Jack Campbell, like I got a lot of horses in the race there. I mean, I mean, when Kyle Clifford was there last year, I mean, I joked the night that Spez had the hat trick about calling him, because I remember calling him for an illegal, because he's got this, his stick was like this. And I called him for an illegal stick in Belleville one night and he broke his stick and he was so mad at me. He goes, Futs, how could you do that? And I go, because your stick's the boomerang, it's a rule. And I'm trying to, and he still remembered how upset he was with it, because when he broke his stick, the ref said, well, we can't measure it. I said, no, but that's unsportsmanlike conduct. So he got unsportsmanlike conduct for breaking his stick. We didn't score the power play, but he got me back because my last game as a head coach, I knew I was getting the pipe at St. Mike's, and we were out shooting Mississauga. Jimmy Halton who was in my wedding party, was coaching Mississauga, and we were out shooting them about 65-10. And Spezza scored in overtime to beat us, and I got fired coming off the bench. So he can stick the illegal stick in his ear. Didn't want to talk about the overtime goal, but
that's great.
So many nice stories that would come of it between the Thorntons and that. But I mean, for me now, I don't cheer for teams. I mean, I want to get back into it. I cheer for players that I've been a part of. And I mean, if there's a player that, whether it's, I don't have to have coached them, I just had to, if they've rubbed me the right way, you're hoping they do well. And if they, you don't really cheer against anybody, but I mean, that's why this Leaf thing, it's pretty cool watching some of these guys that you had a little part in their careers kicking the can around in Toronto.
Futa, I know we have to let you get to work, and it's a tough gig watching hockey, but quick. Chris and I, as broadcast partners, have taken on or carried on the tradition that Don Cameron started with me, and that is every rink you go into, you buy a 50-50 ticket. What's it like winning a 50-50 draw, Futa?
Well, Don Cameron was in that booth when I broke in so many years back, and the look in his face, I was like, what am I doing in here? I know, I got so ticked off one night, and I ran in and busted in your door there in Kitchener while you guys were in the middle of the broadcast. It was like a scene out of the WWE. And after I was done screaming at you guys, for some reason, unbeknownst to myself now, it was one of those things that was a learning lesson. But I was recently divorced, and I was in Edmonton, and I've never bought a 50-50. I mean, I think my parents and I won a fruit basket or something at Pine Point Arena watching a lacrosse game once. And they keep flicking up on the boards that it's like, I'm like, wow, it's like $87,000 for the 50-50 draw. So I get up, and I had flown in early the night, so I had all the tickets. I didn't have any scouts with me, no teammates with me. So I had like 8 seats beside me. I remember a big Wayne Gretzky bottle of wine that they gave the scouts, and all the tickets, and I get a little gift bag, and I go down, and the first lady sold out of tickets. And then this lady goes, I have one ticket. And so it was just one ticket too, because you get, like, some people had sheets. So I just bought the one ticket, and I'm sitting up there, and I still remember, because Canada was just kicking the tar out of Czech Republic. It was something like 6 or 7-1. And they announce it, and I'm kind of scrambling with all my tickets, and I look, and I did the biggest double take, because it just, if you've ever had a 649 ticket or something, you see a couple numbers, you get excited, but it resonated. Like, it just went, oh, wait. Then I kind of put it down. I put my test down, turned it upside down, rolled my test over again, looked again. I was like, called a police officer over and said, can you just take, and he's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, okay. So I won $43,000. He goes, no, 87,000. That's the total amount. So now I'm rattled, completely rattled. I'm like sweating like the pilot on an airplane. We have this rule that you're not allowed to leave the game early, but they're telling me I have to go down. Like, Dean Lombardi has a rule, you can't leave to the final buzzer. And I'm getting up with my wine and my tickets. And I remember going by Brad Trelling. He was with Arizona at the time. And he's like, whoa. Wait till Dean Lombardi finds out that Mike Futa's leaving the game early. And I'm like, I think I won. And they're like, of course. And I go down, and I go into the little booth there, and they've got the cameras and stuff, and I hand them the ticket, and I'm like, and of course my mind is like thinking, I'd just gone through divorce, and I'm like, does my ex-wife get any of this? It was so bad. I was asking all the wrong questions. I'm like, is this tax-free? Like, what is this? And it was like, I'm literally should be elated, and I'm literally trying to call a lawyer and find out. And they give you like one of these checks that's like Bob Barker, right? So it's not like you put it in your friggin' pocket. It's like one of these billboard things. And I'm like, okay, this is great. I got to get out of here. And they're like, no, we need your name. And I'm like, I can't give you my name. I said, I'm here working. So I was going to give them a fake name. And they go, no, you need to see your ID. So I give him and I actually put Mississauga. I go, Mike Futa from Mississauga. So sure enough, I'm walking out. I almost forget the wine, forget the tickets. I actually took the wine and gave it to somebody, because I was giving away everything. I was in such a good mood. And I start to come out, and I hear Gordon Miller, like I'm now watching. He's like, Mike Futa it's such a boring game that it became a talking point. I can't believe this. Mike Futa has just won $87,000 here while scouting for the Los Angeles Kings. And I'm like, so now here, of course, you got my phone is just like, it's up to like 400 messages. And now you got people calling me from school. I don't know if they can borrow money. Rod had called me and was like, he's like, it's totally straight laced. He's like, you were working for the Kings and that's really the Kings' money. And so I had people screwing with me, but it was unbelievable. And anyways, and yes, my ex-wife was calling, and I remember getting in the cab, and this guy is driving me back to my hotel. And I've got this Bob Barker check. I mean, they gave you a real one too, but you've got the big fake one. And by now everybody knows about it. So I have to get out of the rink while all the hockey guys are giving it to me. And this cab driver, they turn on the radio, and the radio station's going, yeah, it's a tough game tonight, but get this, a scout for the Los Angeles Kings won $87,000. So now I've got this, let's just say, I'm not quite sure he was Canadian driving my taxi. And he just goes into a rant about, I'm driving a taxi and some effing guy wins $87,000 at the game. And I'm just like, so I wait till I get back to the hotel, and I remember reaching in and I gave him like $200, and he's like, what? And I go, I'm that guy. It was awesome. So I took our scout, I think I gave our scouts each $1,000 or something, and then took the guys out for dinner and put the rest of my daughter's education account. And it's one of those stories now I have to go through every time somebody announces 50-50 draw. Everybody turns around and is like, rub up against me, come on, And the funny thing, the next night, I can't remember, he's assistant coach for Calgary, NHL. His father won the next night, something like 92,000. So it was becoming an NHL dominated event, which was not going over well with the people that were supposed to win. But it was awesome. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but it was quite a unique experience.
Real quick, if I can, real quick.
Yeah.
We talked about Don Cameron and the traditions we keep up. Every time we go to Owen Sound, we get the French fries. In all the rinks you've been in, have you tasted a better French fry than the Harry Lumley Bayshore Community Center?
Yes.
Oh, where?
The Staples Center.
Okay. Do they come with like truffles on it?
I think there's 9 different types of French fries at the place that they have them. But Lumley's pretty good, but I got to be honest, it was such a strange setup for me there that I never had them.
Oh, so good.
But it's like literally, because we didn't have a management box there, right? So I'd go in, and the guys would go out. I'd take my suit off, go into the gym, and just ride the bike for the first 2 periods. And then I'd put my suit on and go out and stand by the glass and watch the 3rd period, because there was no, like, at the time, there was really no spot. I mean, the management wasn't going to, there were just so many places, only so many boxes for revenue. So they weren't going to give up a box for revenue for the management side. So I had a little treat down. So it didn't involve French fries.
Talking French fries and Fute's riding the bike.
Yeah. Short is funny, because I had this huge dilemma at the time, because Brian Johnson, who's another wonderful gentleman, but at the time he owned the Kelseys and the Montanas, right? And he used to come in every day and kind of go, well, the boys were at Shorty's last night. I don't know if we're going to be able to keep the team going unless you get them going to Shorty's and Kelseys and Montanas. And I'm like, are you really? I said, we're in the smallest town in the league. If you start telling my guys that they can't go to a different restaurant every now and then, we're going to be in trouble here. So no, it was a great experience. But again, I love getting back up there. I always call ahead and they put me up in that little corner, and I usually don't see a shift because all the same people come walking by and we just share the same stories. And it's not my easiest place to get a good watch in, but it's always worth going up and seeing friends and family up there. It'll always be my second home.
Great city. The Chi-Chi-Mon there, Harrison Park. It's beautiful.
Hey, Fred Wallace,
Freddie,
Ray McKelvey.
Yeah, it's the way it's supposed to be up there. Futes, it's always fun. Can't wait to see you back around a rink, but appreciate you obviously making time to do this with us. Great stories to share and talk about the league we all love so much.
It's an incredible league. I mean, just to think about what these kids must be going through this year, not playing, and hopefully they can get back at it and get it figured out. Because I always said it's my favorite league, what's closest to home, and it was the breeding grounds for what led to my my existence in the National Hockey League. So I'm very grateful for it.
Whenever you're at a Ranger game, make sure to barge into our press box.
It's neutral now. It's neutral. It's all
Neutral.
good.